So I would like to welcome you in my class. Welcome, guys. Thank you very much for being here to the introduction of environmental policy management. And I would like to start right away from asking you the questions that I would like you to express your opinion on them.
Hello, Tanya. Thank you for the invitation, of course. Hello, Francesca. Environmental sustainability is quite a controversial terminus. So depending on who you are, on which profession you do, you would answer it in a different way. That means that if you're a biologist, you would say environmental sustainability is this procedure of regenerating nature. And if you are a linguist, you might say that it is a pleonasm, since environment is sustainable. So environmental sustainability is an excess. But I'm a lawyer, and as a lawyer, I would say that always we have to define these essentially contested termini, these indefinite legal words, according to either jurisdiction, so court decisions, or legislation, written texts. So in order to answer that, I would search for relevant decisions or legislations. And I don't think I would find any, because environmental legislation is environmental sustainability is something which is similar with the sustainable development due to sustainability, but at the same time, it can mean anything. You know, it's like a plastic word. So I believe environmental sustainability refers to a set of policies regarding the resource exploitation in a sustainable manner. I would, though, distinguish it with sustainable development and say that it's different. I would like to see it in a context in order to be able to answer what it exactly means. I just want to remark that there are over 300 definitions for sustainability, according to several papers, and that it is considered as a plastic word, that it can mean almost everything.
Okay, so I think sustainability is one of the most recurring terms of our age, but at the same time, one of the most vague terms. So if we want to look for a definition, it's barely impossible to find just one definition of sustainability. Of course, there are various conceptual frameworks about the relationship between the environment and the society and economics. But if we want to look for a definition, I would say let's go and look into the international agreements that have been adopted in the past 40 years. And I would like to recall a special statement, a specific statement in the Brundtland report, where we read that we all depend on one biosphere for sustaining our lives. So in addition to that, the report also says that there are thresholds that cannot be crossed. So based on these two statements, I would say that environmental sustainability deals first with the understanding and the awareness of the fact that the environment is crucial for human life, on one hand. So it's like being aware of the fact that there is ground under our feet and there is air that we breathe every day. But secondly, I would say that environmental sustainability deals with the recognition of specific limits for human activities. So it's like, if we want to use a metaphor, it's like being aware that there is a maximum weight on the lift that we can put. If we look at the Earth as a lift, so there is a specific limit for human activities. And the third thing is that sustainability is also a stimulus for proactive action, conscious action in everyday life for all of us.
Economics in environmental policy is actually like saying the story of the humankind on this planet in short. because it's actually not more, not less than the offering of resources from generous offering of resources from the earth and transforming them from the humans. That's the economy. Well, now I would say that primarily the role of economics serves economic activity. In that framework, it doesn't serve, it doesn't have any role in environmental policies. Of course, we can frame it in another meaning, like saying environmental economics, and say that environmental economics do play a role in environmental policies. So I would say there is an indirect role in environmental policies. And that would be expressed like taxes or tax differentiation or deposit fund systems or import taxes, whatever. That would be the role of economics in environmental policies. The second crucial point in answering this question would be the pricing, the evaluating of resources, which is also very significant. And the third would be the calculating of environmental damage. That means that we have several stakeholders who can work with economics within environmental policies. For example, the court or the administration or the national legislator would use economics in order to commodify a resource, in order to make an asset out of a resource, or would use it in order to calculate a penalty, or in order to calculate the cost, the use of the resource. On the other hand, the policymaker and NGO could use economics in order to create a monetary value in resources.
Okay, let me quote the sentence of two economists, so Brevets and Livermore, and they say that the overlap between environmental policy and economics is so extensive right now that environmental economics is a completely different discipline within the field of economics. And there are various topics that can illustrate the role of economics in environmental policy. I would say, let's talk just about two of them: cost-benefit analysis on one hand and instrument choice on the other hand. So imagine that you are a policymaker and you have to decide how to use a piece of land and whether to use this piece of land for a recreation area or a residential area. You need to choose between different policies. And there are two main questions that policymakers have to deal with. The first is about the goal, the end of the policy. And the second is about the tool, the means to achieve that goal. In order to set a goal, economics plays a very important role because it allows policymakers to establish this goal, to determine the goal. How? By means of the so-called social maximization of the social welfare. So the cost-benefit analysis is an instrument that actually allows policymakers to weigh costs and benefits of different policies and choose the policy that actually allows to achieve what is considered as the level of environmental improvement, environmental quality, close to what is the socially desirable level of environmental protection. On the other hand, of course, there are many pitfalls in the cost-benefit analysis. For example, there are opposing views about the incommensurability of the benefits to the environment, how to quantify the benefits. But in any case, the cost-benefit analysis remained as the most common tool to choose between policies. And economics plays another important role for the instrument choice. So once you set a goal, then policymakers have to choose the most efficient tool, the most cost-effective tool between regulation, taxation, liability. And each of these tools has different costs. For example, cost of enforcement, cost of information. There, economics plays a major role in suggesting the most efficient tool to achieve the goal, the prefixed goal.
Well, ecosystem services as a concept is one of many human inventions, let's say. Ecosystem services is an anthropocentric approach of giving prices to resources, from soil, water, atmosphere to whatever, to a singing bird or a sun setting. I must say already in the beginning that I dislike the concept of ecosystem services for a reason. Ecosystem services transforms moral values into monetary values. So this has endangers. Has some implications, has impacts. I would say for your students, Tanya, that they have, and everybody of us, have to think of all these neologisms, all of these concepts, that they are like a knife. You know, you have a knife and you can cut the bread with it, and it is a very useful tool. Or you have a knife and you can take a life. So ecosystem services is almost like this. That means that in the case of the court, in the case of the administration, of calculating a damage, in the case of evaluating a resource in order to restore the environment, for example, it's a very useful tool, of course, and it is needed. In the case of exploiting resources, it can be dangerous. Not the tool itself, like the knife, but the use, actually the misuse of this tool. What I mean by that is that you can indefinitely commodify resources, even resources which are posed in serious threats, or even resources which are essential for life on this planet, without any limit. So having a limited use of ecosystem services is a way of a useful, makes it a useful tool. The misuse, not.
Let me provide an example based on my research. It's a case of 2010 that ended just in 2018. It's 2010, and the Republic of Costa Rica sued the Republic of Nicaragua because of incursion and occupation and use of the territory of Costa Rica. The Republic of Costa Rica sued the other state before the International Court of Justice and claimed damages for this illegal activity that caused environmental harm. In 2018, the International Court of Justice finally settled the case and imposed the other state, Nicaragua, to pay an amount of damages for the environmental harm that caused 8 years before, based on an ecosystem approach together with the traditional methodology of the replacement cost. So actually the Court of Justice, the International Court of Justice, for the first time talked about paying an amount of damages related to the impaired ecosystem services. and not just measured in terms of replacement costs. So based on this case, I can say that from my perspective, the use of ecosystem services is really helpful, is very useful in the domain of liability for environmental damage, because it allows to reach a higher amount of damages. And why is this important? Because if we look at the mechanism and how liability works from an economic perspective, liability is able to really deter polluters from committing damage to the environment, so is efficient only where liability provides polluters with incentives, optimal incentives to adopt a level of care and a level of activity that are able to minimize the social costs. So from an economic perspective, liability can work only where the potential polluter can have an idea of what will be the estimated loss. And if we adopt a methodology which is uncertain or that lower the amount of damages, this will bring automatically polluters to adopt a lower level of care. And so will, in general, not adopting a right methodology can really undermine the efficiency and the deterrence of liability.
Of course, the challenges are many and can be differentiated from global, regional and local level. But if I would say one word in order to determine what's the main challenge, I would say limits. Limits is the main challenge, which has been in debate since the last decades. That was the debate in 1972 with the Limits to Growth report. That was again the debate in 1992 in the Rio Declaration in the Brundtland Committee, as Francesca also before remarked. And that was also the debate last year in November 2019 in Europe, but also in 2019 in the United States about the Green Deal and the Green New Deal in the US. The whole thing is about limitation to world trade. Okay, I mean, there are also separate issues like the production consumption model and so on, but the most significant part for me is world trade. If your students consider that the WTO, the World Trade Organization, its members are representing the 97% of economic activity globally, then you can understand that the main challenge we are confronting as environmentalists is how to put economic activity, global economic activity in a globalized market, in a business-driven market, how to set it as an issue, how to set the scientific dialogue on limiting economic activity. This is the main obstacle, because every time a state, a national state or an international organization comes and brings a prohibition, a ban, a new taxation or whatever, like plastic bags or like tins, beer cans, or like tuna fish. There are many cases around the globe. But the industry comes in contrary and says this is protectivistic. This is the preferential rule for the competitors or for national producers, or this is a discriminatory law. And we have to confront, actually, this is the main challenge, and not in things like the environment or the 1.5 degrees Celsius. These are also challenges, but the most significant for me is how to compete with industry. Now, give me just a half second to say that the transformative change we need, in my eyes, throughout my whole last decade of search and environment is how to put profit out of the harmful industrial activity. This is it. This is where we should focus in. Put profit out of the harmful industrial activity. Everybody can do it in every level of social life, from the industry, from supranational institutions, to bilateral agreements, to the individual himself. It's a matter of changing, the collective imaginary. This is also what we're trying to do in my project. I'm coordinating Life Natura Themis. We are trying to raise awareness in order to be able, in every level of social life, to change, to have this transformative change, as you nicely said, and demoralize things which are counterproductive in protecting the environment.
Okay, so let me clarify something in advance. I think that morality, ethics can create powerful inner motives for individual behaviors, but we cannot expect homologation of lifestyles in the wake of these kind of virtues. If we want a big impact, we need a combination. We need morality, we need ethics, but we need also to align our behaviors with the economic incentives. And secondly, I think that the highest ideals have to have the moral duty to become as much practical as possible in order to be really effective. I'm not saying that we don't need ideals. I'm just saying that we don't need only ideals, because they are not enough. So what I would see as the way forward, I think we need to identify the real bottlenecks, the real problems in the process, and remove the big rocks from the road. This is what I would, and for example, if I look at my research field, I look at the debate between economists and ecologists. And I am very frustrated because they never reach an agreement on how to quantify the value of nature for specific purposes, which liability is one of them, but we can find other possible environmental policies that still need to put a dollar value on natural resources. If we lack unanimity on these kind of problems, then we never reach a solution. And I think we need to cross the boundaries. We need more communication between different fields. We need lawyers that are not afraid of entering other fields. But we also need ecologists that can speak more with the people of other fields. So I would say in the final point is also that I think many problems are rooted into a different knowledge that we have about the environment. So we also need to share more knowledge about how the natural resources work. So yes, we need a change, but we need a change that can achieve common goals together with common tools, together with communication, interdisciplinarity, and just to quote the words of Theodore Roosevelt that are in the entrance of the American Museum, we can read that young people have to keep their eyes on the stars and at the same time their feet on the ground. So this is what I would see in the future. Okay, I think this is not just a problem about the definition of sustainability, because there are many terms in the scientific world that are not well defined. Not really well defined is not the right word. I would say it's you don't have just one definition. So sustainability is one of them, and in general, what happens and how this issue is solved is just solved by policymakers. So scientists are just gathered in for international agreements, conventions, and then they try to provide policymakers with a common definition. But they first need to be gathered in a common arena, let's say, where they receive a specific question from policymakers, and then they provide an answer. But this is very, the lack of definition, as I feel it from an external perspective, is really a characteristics, a peculiarity of science, because science is such a democratic world where nobody can really decide what is the best definition. So it's inevitable to have this kind of issues.
Okay, in my eyes, there has never been an intention to define sustainable development or sustainability or whatever results out of it. Seriously, the aim has always been to couple economic growth, economic activity, development, in other words, with environmental protection. And there comes sustainable development, which is actually an oxymoron, I mean, from every point of view. Okay? That's the point. Why it is widespread? It's the distribution channels. I mean, it's the network. You know, when you have it in an international level, when you have it in an international organization, then directly you have it in the UN, for example, you have it in the 190 members of the UN. And then from the 190 members, you directly have it in the national governments. You can provide it everywhere. You have it in the meanwhile in schools and regions, of course. And nobody is really concerned in the end what it means, because sustainable development is a plastic word. It can mean almost anything. So it can be used from almost everyone. And that was the intention, to be able to use it.
Could you please explain us a bit more what you mean with the term plastic word?
Plastic is a Greek word which means when you can form an object as you like. You know, it's like it's a bit fluid and you can change its structure in the opportunity of the hour, let's say.
Well, for example, when we talk about cost-benefit analysis, as I was saying before, there are many there's much criticism about the calculation of benefits, for example, because again you have the same problem: how to put a dollar value of nature. And there are also very, very strong voices in the economic debate against the cost-benefit analysis for this reason. They propose alternative instruments, but they also have some pitfalls, and there are also some different views. For example, people saying that when you adopt an environmental policy, you should not weigh costs and benefits. You should just follow another principle. So, for example, Sunstein identifies the main difference between environmental policy in the EU and the environmental policy in the US by talking about the principle of precaution. So the precautionary principle, but also other principles, the polluter pays principle, are all principles that can shape environmental policies in the European Union. But I would say, in any case, if we look at climate change policies, for example, the whole debate was around how to calculate the social cost of carbon. So even if there are pros and cons in the traditional economic instruments, they are still used. So my point is that probably there are alternatives, but the economic tools are so widespread that it will be, in my opinion, it will be almost impossible to get rid of them. But I don't see so much a problem in that, to the extent that efficiency can reach a kind of compromise with equity. So I would say we can also try to allocate resources in a more efficient way, so follow the efficiency reasoning, but at the same time we can get a little bit closer to the equity reasoning and the need to provide more environmental protection.
Well, I would see two alternatives. The first would be focus more in the net benefit. You know, there are many studies speaking of benefits from exploiting a resource or whatever, and there are many studies speaking of losses by exploiting the same resource. The problem is that the two studies are fragmented. You know, there is no somebody assigned to check the net benefit. And I think that every study should focus more in the net benefit. That's the first, and it's very similar to what Francesca also remarked. The second is setting red lines. You know, it's not always the matter of who applies a policy, it's a matter where the policy is applied. So, I mean, speaking of, for example, of reserves, of protected areas. In Greece, for the moment, you have industrial activities like mining or industrial production of energy within the protected areas. You can locate them within a protected area. You just have to put a red line and say, no, I won't do that. It's a reserve. That means there are species there to protect for the future, or there are habitats where life is regenerated, and these places should be in strict protection, for example. So there are alternatives. Commodification cannot be unlimited. We must choose which are the vital elements of life, and in that elements, we should limit down commodification.
Yeah, that's this question actually goes straight to the core of my research, because I'm trying to respond to this question for liability. And I would say, yes, we have different methodologies in either in economics or in ecological economics. And all these methodologies have advantages and disadvantages. So the most traditional methodologies normally focus just on the use value of nature, which is the value based on the use, on the consumption of nature. And why are these methodologies based on the use value? Just because there you have a price. So it was easier to find a proxy for the social preferences of people. But at some point in the 60s, in the end of the 60s, some economists started to say, well, if we just look at the use value of nature, actually nobody's going to invest $1 on the rest of the value, on what is not normally priced, like the non-use value of nature. And there, economists started to develop more and more methodologies to estimate the non-use value of nature, like the existence of nature, the existence value, the option value, the bequest value. There are many types of values, but there we have many problems, because as we don't have a price, any kind of methodology, and especially the contingent valuation methodology, which is based on surveys, is still uncertain and not really reliable. There are now they developed very advanced guidelines, so it seems that the methodology is more reliable compared to 30 years ago. But still, it's not really accepted in the whole economic literature. And it remains also a very discussed, debated methodology, because in any case, you are asking people to tell a price, to give a value, a price for nature. But how can you really make sure that the people can give a real value? And we also have this issue about the difference between willingness to pay and willingness to accept. So, and there are many biases in people when you ask what's the value of nature, if you frame the question as a willingness to pay, or if you frame the question as a willingness to accept. So the problem is real. The point is that we cannot really overcome this problem if we just remain in the economic literature, in my opinion. That's why using or adopting or applying the economic methodologies to the ecosystem services can be a step forward, because there you can still have many issues with the methodologies, but at least you are enlarging the object of the analysis. So you are not just looking at the use value and non-use value of environmental goods, but then you are also looking at the use value and non-use value of services of environmental goods. So at least we are trying to reach a more, I would say, the more we go upper and the closer we are to the truth. That's the point. But we, in general, I would say we don't really need to reach the highest amount of value. It depends on the policy. It depends on the goal, what we need to reach. So if that's the main point. So every question should be really specific to the policy and the domain where we need to apply then this dollar value.
Adding to that, think of following hypothesis. You have the best available methodology, most updated, most studied and sophisticated, and everything. There is still an objective problem. All methodologies are time and place bound. That means they are all relative to the time and to the place where they are studied, where they evolve. That would mean that the simple example we use in the university is what the water would cost in Africa today and what the water costs in the US today. Or what, for example, the tropical forest was worth in 1920 and what is the tropical forest worth in 2020. So it's really bound in time and place. And this makes all methodologies, no matter how good elaborated they are, a fragile and insecure place to be as a researcher. The regeneration of nature and the irreversibility of damages are so fluid. You cannot really judge. I mean, you can play God if you like and set costs, prices. But I think the only secure approach would be setting the red lines there where you feel uncomfortable, where you know a priori that you cannot have a methodology which is not bound to the place or to the time which is met.
Maybe just a follow-up to this answer. I think it's, I mean, the red line you are talking about is just the concept of ecological conservation in ecology, right? So it's the same when ecologists say that we just need to protect nature to avoid any kind of damage. But then you also need to invest something to take care of the environment, even in that case, right? Even if you put a red line and you say there, I will not build anything that can harm the environment, but still you need to do something. You can't just put a boundary. You cannot just put a fence. Or it's a question for you. It's you can.
You have regulation in order to regulate activity, and you have the ability of imagination as a human being, and you can not only prognose future, but you can only imagine of what you cannot prognose. I mean, it's really interesting the way we function as human beings. That gives us the ability to put red lines, and this has always been the case. I mean, okay, we are living now in an era, in a neoliberal era where international trade rules across the globe, and as I said before, restrictions are considered as barriers, are considered to have social and economic impacts. We live in an era where this triple bottom principle rules, but I invite the students, everyone, to think, to imagine if we could live in an era where the triple bottom line would be a single bottom line, setting the environment, the preservation of the environment in the bottom line. Upon that, we can of course discuss about economic activity, the frames, the barriers, or how broad it can be. But first, we have to guarantee that the space is there, enabling us to be economically active.
Well, it's a matter of time. I would say when you read, for example, the European Green Deal and all the I would say this whole policy set that should incentivize investments in green finance and all these things, they somehow they are trying to implement this concept, that we don't have time, so we need to move to act now. The point is that is that enough? Is that enough to invest just on renewable energies if we are still producing energy from coal? So is that enough if we don't change our habits? That's the main point of sustainability, I think. So it's not just about introducing new policy measures, it's about stopping from doing what we are doing now. And I think then if we really want to achieve that, we need to do what we were saying before. We need to spread awareness among the people to learn how the environment is working. So probably if we really want to act fast, policy measures are not enough. We need also a huge effort coming from the scientific field in communication and teaching us about the environment, because it seems to me that we don't really know what are the consequences of our action on the, we say very easily that yes, the environment is crucial for our life, but we don't really understand that. We don't know. And that's why we are we are lacking respect for the environment, in my opinion.
Speaking of demoralizing some concepts or some current harmful activities, is of course an ongoing procedure which might take hundreds of years. So that's not the point as time runs out in means of effective implementing measures and policies. So that's the point. The point is to act fast, but not spasmic, not rough, not in a way that you will have, you will be counterproductive to the aim, or you will have a new battle between ecologists and economists. We don't have this luxus anymore to battle with each other. So I would say that we have to be brave, and we can change the world, we can transform the world from one day to the other, as soon as we decide as a global community what we want to leave behind. And as soon as we set the right questions, like to whose profit do we continue the economic activity in its current form? To whose loss are we continuing the economic activity in its current form? As soon as we set the questions, we will find the answers. It doesn't really care what my personal, my subjective answer to that would be. What is significant for me is that the international human community sets first these questions, decide and agree on the questions to be set, and afterwards we can find the answers. I'm working with green criminality. So the main scope, green criminality, somebody should know, is the fourth crime in wealth, in income. I don't know how to express that. In gains, worldwide, after drugs, counterfeiting, and women, sex, whatever. It comes forth. The way to battle, to combat green criminality is to put the profit out of it. As soon as it is not profitable anymore to handle with species from the Amazon forest, or to handle with elephant, this white, the teeth. As soon as it is not profitable anymore, it won't be a case for criminals. So what I'm trying to bridge right now as an idea is how to put profit out from economic activity. I mean, from harmful economic activity, yes, don't misjudge me. Because there is a broad harmful economic activity. And there are ways already studied in a different frame of putting profit out. And I'm trying to bridge the two frames.
I can add something on that, because it's more or less also what I'm trying to do, but in the civil law domain. So it's, I would say it's not about putting the profit out, but putting the cost in. So trying to, the profit is just the difference between benefits and costs. So if you want to reduce the benefit, you can just higher the cost. So the whole problem is, in general, always the fact that the costs for economic activities are too low. They are too low because of many reasons, because there are policymakers that were not brave enough for adopting laws that had to internalize these costs in the economic activity. Or you may have just technical, methodological issues that you don't know exactly how to calculate those costs. So it depends on the reasons. But for civil liability is a bit the same, meaning that you can really deter a polluter from committing damage to the environment if you make him realize how much will be the cost in the end. And the cost is uncertain because there are no laws which are really setting down remedies for environmental harm liability that have a very high amount of damages. So even now, imposing on potential polluters to pay just the cost of restoration seems to be a kind of big achievement in environmental liability, but it's not like that, because if you pay just the cost of restoration, you're not paying the whole cost that you cause to the environment. So the big idea that is also inspiring my research is to understand how we can introduce a higher cost, how we can internalize a higher cost to the environment in liability.
Francesca, can you also define what environmental liability is for you?
Liability is that I'm going to pay an amount of damages because I caused a harm to, in this case, in environmental liability, to the environment. So if I cause a harm to the environment, then there will be someone that will sue me because of the harm I caused, and will claim damages from me. So, of course, environmental liability is just about accidents that occur between parties which are not previously related by a contractual relationship. So it's the case of a polluter and the people living around the area where the polluter is causing harm to the environment.